the English Commonwealth, and the Glorious Revolution, which is where it all ends. Spoiler alert. 1688. And the Diggers are fascinating because with Winstanley, Gerrard Winstanley, who is the leading digger, who wrote the pamphlet that is like their most important document. Uh, he actually anticipates Marx's analysis of class society by 200 years. He writes in his pamphlet, whose name is fucking annoyingly. What is it called? It's called The New Law of Righteousness. That's it. Uh, and in it, he says, yeah, all these Cromwell, the Puritans, all these Calvinists, they're trying to create a godly world. They're trying to create godly institutions. But they cannot succeed because property ownership alienates man from God in such a way that it guarantees that human relations are filled with strife, violence, lies, domination. Now he uses religious language, but his uh, diagnosis of society is essentially Marx's. I mean, obviously Marx is going to use different a different heuristic to get there because he has arrived at a point where belief in God, the way that Winstanley had, is no longer accessible to an educated man like Marx. But Winstanley saw the same essential flaw to all religious political movements that sought to maintain the social structure as it existed, from Luther on. Because Luther insists, yes, the princes are wicked, but people are more wicked. And we have to, we need strong princely hands to maintain structures that can allow for the word to be propagated and for people to be saved. But Winstanley says the word that is being propagated is a lie. The word that's being propagated exists to maintain this sinful arrangement of ownership, of property. Uh, and nobody listened to him, so he took about 19 followers and went to a vacant lot in Surrey and tried to live there in common as an example, which is what happens when uh, great religious movements hit the rocks of entropy, and some local landowners, goons, drove him off the land, of course. And then he ended up becoming a Quaker. And the Quakers emerged out of the same period. The Quakers are also a product of the religious efflorescence of the English Civil War, and they come to similar conclusions, but because of the overwhelming power of institutions, accept a quietist religion that denies the possibility of living godly in a class society, but then attempts to find fellowship within it. And, that's where we all have to start. That's where we all have to start. And that's and I know that I have an instinctive resistance to that because it means, oh, you're just saying don't fight. But, what are you fighting for? Again, if you're fighting to change the world, you're fighting for a egotistic fantasy of your own ability to understand and overpower the entire the collected forces of history. You have to act for other people first. Any meaningful action is going to come from that. And, the problem with the hippies is that they tried that too, but they were emerging in a period when people who went to college like they did were given the world. They were able to basically guarantee themselves lifetime of material security. So that means any idealism is going to curdle in the face of that certainty. What we have now is something completely different. We have the end of security. We have the end of certainty. We have the end of material satisfaction. What that means for us, I have no idea. But it's important. I think it's very important. Yeah, this is from, I just Googled it to remember the title, but this is from I didn't use this quote in the script, but I'll read it now. This is from the New Law of Righteousness by Winstanley. In the beginning of time, the great creator Reason made the earth to be a common treasury, to preserve beasts, birds, fishes, and man. The Lord that was to govern this creation, for man had domination given to him over the beasts, birds, and fishes. But not one word was spoken in the beginning, that one branch of mankind should rule over another. And the reason is this: every single man, male and female, is a perfect creature of himself, and the same spirit that made the globe dwells in man to govern the globe, so that the flesh of man, being subject to reason, his maker, hath him to be his teacher and ruler within himself. Therefore needs not run abroad after any teacher and ruler without him, for he needs not that any man should teach him, for the same anointing that ruled in the Son of Man teacheth him all things. And so selfish imaginations taking possession of the five senses, and ruling as king in the room of reason therein, and working with covetousness, did set up one man to teach and rule over another, and thereby the spirit was killed, and man was brought into bondage, and became a greater slave to such as his own kind than the beasts of the field were to him. He is finding in the isolated, egotistical enshrinement of reason, of one's own perception, as the root of class society. I am not of, I am embodied myself, as opposed to the reality, which is I am not anything. I am not. I am a chimera. I am a fantasy. I am a straw dog. All is. I am not. But because we perceive as individuals, it is that individual perception that eventually forces us to reify the world in that image and break apart our connections to one another and dominate one another. Because if I am all and I am eternal, if God is really only my own reflection, then my pleasures become the only end to seek. And the only way to seek pleasure is to alienate labor from oneself onto someone else. There's another quote from that I actually did use in the script that I want to say, just because it's like, you read that and you're like, damn, this motherfucker, this is 1650s. This is capitalism is literally just being born, and he is saying stuff that it would take that it would take another 200 years to be articulated uh, in different language. He said, "So long as such as rulers call the land theirs, upholding this particular property as mine and thine, the common people shall never have their liberty, nor the land ever freed from troubles, oppressions, and complainings. He also, part of this, he had like a theory of cultural superstructure, because he says the universities and churches that we have can only be poisoned and can only bring forth a poisoned religious belief because they are dependent upon these property relations for their own existence. So even though people could see what was happening at that point, capitalism still emerged unfazed, unscathed, unchallenged really by any force that could like fundamentally threaten it, because every effort, even with this knowledge, everything you could do only pushed it forward. That was capitalism in its ascendant phase. Everything everyone did, one way or another, pushed capitalism's institutions forward, dug their talons deeper into the land, pushed people into a more marketized relationship with one another. Like the Puritans who fled America, who fled England, were doing so because this new marketized world was fucking with them. They couldn't handle it. They were the most sensitive, the most delicate flowers in the garden were the ones who said, I can't hack this. I cannot square a godly world with life under Charles I. And so they went across the ocean. They risked their lives to try to create a world in North America that would allow them to actually live in a godly way. And in so doing, they fucking put into North America the seeds of capitalism's ultimate fluorescence, ultimate domination of the entire globe. Because anything less than total resistance to the state and annihilation of the self is going to fulfill capitalism's dictate. Unless you were willing to go to Munster and be starved out by the Prince Bishop until they fucking came in and cut your gizzards open and hung you in gibbets next to the cathedral, you were going to build capitalism. Now, we're at the end of this cycle. Now, everything the capitalists do, everything everybody is doing to try to either thrive under capitalism or survive its dictates is undermining its ability to persist as a technological supply chain, as a structure of institutions that reproduce capitalism. That's terrifying because what else is there? There is nothing else built. Gramsci's quote, this is the time for monsters. We got a lot of monsters. It's a fucking monster mash right around now, just like it was in the 1600s. But we are building something somewhere. The reason I believe that is because I believe that consciousness is all there is. Like the material world that we think of as like real is not the real thing. The real thing, the eternal thing, is the consciousness that we are part of. And the definition of consciousness is that it is retrospective. Consciousness is not a response to stimuli. Consciousness is the building of a narrative, building of a story around stimuli that can only happen after the stimuli has already happened. And this is what I think happens during that swirling towards the black hole. That elongation of time and space is a connection to the culmination that has happened somewhere, that has always happened, that generates everything else around it. When he says it's confusing that communism is directly connected to atheism, yet it seems more godly, this is the kind of contradiction that you have to deal with, and that makes that dooms most of us, dooms our simulations to failure. Because to really embrace a collective destiny for mankind, you have to break with the old structures that only reinforced class society. But along with that is a vocabulary of transcendence that has to be claimed and has to be carried forward. And that challenge is difficult, to say the least. And it's that gap, it's that vacuum that led so many socialist projects into spiritual wilderness and made the building of like the new man impossible. Like Stalin didn't build a new man. Mao couldn't build a new man with his Cultural Revolution. Because they gave up a horizon by trying to do it in one country. But again, what else are you supposed to do? To survive. But why do you want to survive? Once again, it is that lack of faith that pulls us back from the full confrontation with that which is, that needs to become universalized, or far more universalized than it ever has, to truly challenge things as they are.